I've lost count of the number of times people have told me that they would love to speak out against the Islamization of Western society, but they're afraid to. They're afraid of being stigmatized as a racist, of being arrested as a criminal, of damaging their career prospects, or even of losing their job. And of course, they're afraid of Muslim violence. If you're one of these people, and if, like me, you're dismayed at the effect Islam is having on our fundamental liberties by stifling public debate in this way, and if you believe that Islamophobia and the religion of peace are already strong contenders for the most shameless lie of the 21st century, but you feel too intimidated to say anything publicly, there is still something you can do, and the thought police can't touch you for it because nobody has to know. I make it a point of principle never to buy anything that's been certified halal, because every time I see that word I feel degraded by the cruelty of it and shamed by our society's moral cowardice in not banning it as a criminal activity like importing African bushmeat. In fact, there's a new noodle bar around the corner from me that I was quite looking forward to visiting until they thought it was a good idea to include the word halal on their shop front. Now, I wouldn't go in there if they gave away cup final tickets with every meal. My conscience simply won't allow it. The very idea fills me with deep moral repugnance. It's the nearest thing I can imagine to a sin, short of writing for the Guardian newspaper or staying sober at Christmas. The needless cruelty of halal slaughter is being allowed to bleed into Western society, not only by the current progressive consensus that all cultures are better than ours, but by food producers and retailers eager to grab the Muslim market, and who need to be reminded that the Muslim market is still a minority market and that the rest of us have more buying power. And it's important because halal is the implementation of Sharia. Along with Sharia-compliant finance, it's the thin end of a very much thicker wedge of Islamic cultural terrorism that has already, for example, rendered women's rights negotiable in Britain with the dozens of Sharia courts that now exist here. Politicians and the meat industry have connived against clear labelling, and halal meat has been routinely fed to people without their knowledge or consent in schools, in hospitals and other public places. Recently here in Britain, we had 2 cases where school catering workers lost their jobs for accidentally serving non-halal meat to a Muslim child. In one case, in what was supposed to be a multi-faith school, yet where all the children are fed halal whether they like it or not. The school authorities also offered a grovelling apology to the Muslim parents whose feelings had been so grievously wounded by this insult to their faith, as they put it. But there were no apologies, and there never are, for non-Muslim parents who may be insulted that their children in a supposedly multi-faith school are compulsorily fed meat from animals killed slowly and painfully for the sake of Muslim superstition. No apologies for them, because their feelings don't matter. Yet, according to the Quran, halal meat is not even strictly compulsory for Muslims. If it isn't available, they can eat non-halal and Allah will forgive them. So there's no good reason why we should import it into our society at all when it violates our most basic standards of animal welfare, which are not particularly high in the first place. Didn't Gandhi say the greatness of a nation and its moral progress can be judged by the way its animals are treated? I wonder what he'd make of our moral progress here in halal Britain or America or Australia or any of the other so-called civilized countries that tolerate this practice. Halal slaughtered animals are killed by slitting their throats while fully conscious. They're hung upside down while still alive, and their bodies are drained of blood. They die in pain and they die in terror for the sake of superstition. Even if you don't see Islamization as a problem, surely you can boycott unnecessary cruelty, unless you don't have a problem with that, in which case maybe this whole thing isn't for you. Try not to drag your knuckles on the way out. But this isn't only about meat, far from it. Various Muslim Brotherhood front groups have devised a lucrative racket certifying non-meat foods as halal, and major companies have been lining up to pay them handsomely for certification. This is effectively an Islamic tax on food that goes towards funding the further expansion of Islam into Western society. So whatever you're buying in the supermarket, if it's just a tin of soup or a bag of sugar, it pays to check the label. You might only see a symbol like the letter M framed by a crescent moon, which is the one used on Campbell's soups in Canada, for example, or you might just see the Arabic word for halal. Learn to recognize it on food packaging, and when you see it, just put that package back on the shelf. That's all you have to do. We all still have the freedom to reject this stuff from our personal experience if we want to, without making any fuss about it and without anyone even knowing. But by hitting these companies in the only place they care about, their pockets, we'll be making our statement as loudly as if we stood in the middle of the street shouting it through a megaphone. And all we have to do is read a few labels. There's nothing to be afraid of, we won't be censored, slandered or arrested, and every time we do it, we'll be defending a culture worth defending and winning a small but essential victory for civilization over barbarism. Peace.